Hello everyone, and thanks for coming back to the channel. Today we're looking at the iFlight TurboBee 111R, featuring 1105 4500 kV motors, the iFlight 6X flight controller stack, which has an F411 flight controller, 12 amp 4-in-1 ESC, power switchable VTX of 25 milliwatts, 100 milliwatts, and 200 milliwatts. I flew it on 100 milliwatts. The RunCam Nano 2 FPV camera, 2.3-inch Emax Avant props. It's a top mount micro. The prop guards have landing spurs. You can get it with a Fly Sky, FR Sky, or without a receiver. Bottom plate appears to be 3 millimeters thick. Top plate appears to be 1.5 millimeters thick. It weighs just about 87 grams. I flew it on this 4S GNB 450 milliamp battery, as well as these two 3S batteries. Comes with a right angle USB adapter for easy access, second set of props, 3 extra battery straps, baggie full of various screws, stickers to replace the ones that are on your prop guards, as well as a couple branded stickers. Had a really good morning of flying. Weekend morning, barely any wind. I took out 2 or 3 quads. I had a boatload of batteries, and I started off with this one, I do believe. And this is pretty exciting to me. Many of you might look at it as having those prop guards and might think, you know, it's not for me. And that's okay. But here on the channel, I do get a fair number of people asking for a machine with prop guards that is pretty flyable outside. Of course, we can fly our Whoop style of quads outside just fine, but they really seem to lack some of the performance, and especially if you have much of a breeze, flying something that's 40 grams outside, that can be quite a challenge. Now this one, when it comes in close to 80 grams dry, or close to 90 grams dry, excuse me, you might think, oh, it's not going to fly very well, but as you can see, it flies pretty dang good. Of course, this is on 4S, and I am going to show you a 3S flight as well. And it came with a really nice tune, I thought, so I was pretty happy. Maybe it makes me happy because I don't have to work on the tune. Usually working on the tune, I try to work on those over a course of maybe 2 days, and it might take me somewhere between 6 to 8 packs. You know, it doesn't have huge punch-outs over the house, and some of that is the drag and resistance to those prop guards. But this is your baseline, so if you're someone who's looking for something like this, I presume you're wanting the extra safety of having prop guards, or you're wanting the extra, you're just wanting to protect your motors from taking any damage. And these will protect it, but not in those most extreme circumstances of crashes. So if you go headlong into something immovable like a concrete wall or something, don't expect these prop guards to protect your quad from damage. They're plastic, but they are relatively strong. And in this flight, I do think it was just in the low 50s, because this is about 10 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday or a Sunday, and if I recall correctly, it was pretty chilly. I was actually having some numbingness in my fingers, or coldness in my fingers, but I had a really good time flying this, and you know, it's really hard for me to argue for anyone who might be looking at this against it. You know, it's 4S and 3S capable. The one thing I would advise is if you're making your initial FPV purchase, maybe go 3S first, because it's going to reduce your weight, and it's going to reduce the how dramatic the impact is when you do crash. It also reduces your investment in battery costs, because 4S batteries do cost more. But then when you get kind of a feeling and a handle for everything on 3S, then you can graduate up as budget allows, or time, whatever the case may be, to 4S, and you can enjoy some of the flying fun that you're seeing in front of you. I felt that this was highly unusual as far as that agility goes for something like this. We just normally don't find that. And we get a flight time, for me, a 2 minute and 40 some odd second flight time. That's really rare for me. So high efficiency on a 4S 450 milliamp battery. So I was pretty happy with that. This is the 3S flight, so it's not going to be as aggressive. We won't see some of the maneuvers. Maybe it might be a little bit more muted or gradual. And I wanted to do this primarily because I do think that the target market for this quad is someone who's looking to get started. Especially something that we haven't seen is in this new line of micros, or this new age of micros, the toothpicks and the twigs, that we haven't seen something come out with prop guards. So they have adapted one of their machines to have prop guards. Of course, with this, you know, you could jerry-rig something up if you wanted to do HD on this. I don't know how that would fly. Of course, it's going to add some weight. But this does have a 16 by 16 stack in it. That's why I say you're going to have to jerry-rig something up. I don't know who Jerry is, but apparently he's quite handy. You'll probably have to get some 3D printed pieces in order to mount even the tiniest of HD cams and Whoop boards. But on 3S, I really felt the agility, you know, less speed, more agility was there, because you have less all-up weight. And as you can see, I didn't retune it. I didn't change PID profiles, nothing. I flew it on the same PIDs, same tune that I was on 4S, and I had a good time. And we're still going to get a fairly lengthy flight. I couldn't tell you which exact battery is, but for all intents and purposes, RDQ has batteries made by GNB. I'm presuming they're the same chemistry and makeup that the GNB labeled GNB batteries are. So if you're in the US and you buy from RDQ, I would say if you're looking to get some 3S batteries, get those. If you're maybe living somewhere outside of the US or you don't buy from RDQ, then you want to get the GNB version. Why the label has 5 extra mAh on one brand, I don't know. Maybe that's just marketing, but I'm quite certain they didn't find a way to squeeze in 5 extra milliamp, but maybe. I guess I shouldn't say certain. I'm highly skeptical they found a way to put in an extra 5 milliamp, but it really doesn't matter because you're not going to get much more out of it. And I've never noticed a difference in performance between the two batteries through all my flights. I've been flying both those brands of batteries for a while. And this was something else I wanted to do, was fly around, to do that close proximity with the swing set. I haven't done a lot of that recently. Actually, this morning I had one other quad out, which will be coming up this week. I'll do like I'm thinking about doing a first pack review or a first pack flight demonstration or something like that, where I had actually flown in and out and around just like this, but it was a much smaller quad. So it was fun for me, and so I ended up taking this 3S pack and just kind of doing the same sort of thing. And I thought I would show it to you because it's a good time getting in close and having that extra little challenge of being able to weave in and out, act like a bug, so to speak. It just gives you that extra feeling of fun when you're flying micros. You can do sorts of things like that, because I don't think too many people would do something like that with a 5-incher. But as you can see, we get a 3-minute flight on the 3S, but I was flying a little bit less aggressively, so that's something to consider. So something I was thinking about recently that I haven't been covering in my reviews is most of the quads have that smart audio feature, and I don't even know if it's worth talking about that much more. Maybe I need to mention it only when it doesn't have that. But this, like so many of other quads, it does have a power switchable VTX. I think for some people, outside of having a prop guarded machine in this form factor, the 16x16 stack that allows you to replace individual pieces inside of the stack. So if you have a VTX or a flight controller or ESC goes bad, you can just replace the one piece rather than them all being tied in together, or two of them, the flight controller and ESC being tied in together, which we see quite a bit. And so that stack has been around for a fair bit now. As you can see here, I did add some grip to the top. It doesn't come with any sort of rubber battery mounting, so you will have to put that yourself. You could go bottom mounted if you're more accustomed to that. I don't suspect, because of the market this is aimed at, that you'll have any preference, but you can do that if you choose to. I actually like the fact that they added this on the bottom, because that is a neat little feature to be able to come down and come in flat, and you don't have to worry about sliding across cement and marring up or shaving off the screw heads. So those should remain intact as long as these little spurs do as well. The receiver is tucked away neatly inside a 3D print back here. It is something that in order to bind, you will probably have to remove the top carbon plate and kind of finagle things up so you can reach the bind button in here, but that's not a huge deal. We have these forever tubes, or these tubes that hold our antennas, which again isn't ideal for long range, but this is a micro and it does give us a good, neat, tidy place to have our antennas. Of course, the 3D printed piece also keeps our antenna out of harm's way. I didn't find it came out of there, so it seems as though everything's appropriately engineered here. Also, you might be able to see down in here where this whole piece attaches right down into the flight stack. So this shouldn't be moving around much. It's got two parts, one on each side, that attach to the flight stack. The USB right angle adapter was also a nice touch in my opinion, because if you've got prop guards on here, you can't really get your USB port connected for setup and doing configuration. You'd have to do something like this in order to get your USB cable connected. So you've got that right angle adapter that you can just push in there, and then you can put your USB cable right down in there. So that makes it nice and easy. I was also pleased to find out that it didn't suffer from jello. At least I didn't notice any jello. Maybe you can correct me on that. Another thing that I thought that was pretty interesting was when you do punch outs, I didn't find that it does yaw washout. If you're not familiar with yaw washout, when you're coming in from a dive and you start to do the recovery, sometimes some machines with these sort of hoops on them The yaw washout, as we've kind of coined it here in the hobby, is where it'll pitch up pretty suddenly and abruptly, and then it'll yaw. Usually I find it yaws right somewhere between 90 and 160 degrees. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to instantly crash, but it is definitely a time for quick reaction in order to keep from crashing. This does not suffer from that. Hopefully I'm playing that footage over here in the corner for you to see that. I did do some testing on 3S and 4S, and I found in both cases when you come in from dives that it doesn't suffer from that. So that's partly due to maybe the fact that these are a little bit thinner. Maybe it's the prop design, maybe it's the ESC response, maybe it's the PID tune. All those combination of things can help us with yaw washout. I'm glad to see that they went with the RunCam Nano 2, which is one of my favorite FPV cameras from Micros. The Caddx EOS can be a good camera. It seems to be hit and miss when you get one that's highly red or suffers from a red hue all the time, especially this time of year where we have so many leaves and we have the kind of that orange tint to our leaves. The RunCam Nano 2, you got a good opportunity to see that with that same sort of color problem with that we would see in the Caddx EOS 2, but I was glad they went to that because that is one of my favorite cameras and it is relatively inexpensive to purchase. They did secure down the motor wires with some of that tape that I've mentioned time and time again. Go to the Emax web shop, look under accessories, you'll find this tape, if it's in stock, that is. Of course, we've got the iFlight Carbon. We've talked about Carbon. I've had a number of side conversations. I don't know how, I show it to you, but I don't know how much we can rely on looking at it for the weave. The top layer could be any sort of print, kind of like wallpaper. What's underneath is what's important, but we really can't tell. As far as the flexibility goes on this, it's pretty stiff for something that's, you know, it's 3 millimeters, which is a little bit thicker than most, so you'd expect it to be stiff. But you've also got a really thin body because we've only got that 16 by 16 stack in here. So if I place my thumbs close to the body and I push it down, which is typically what I try to do in these sort of tests, I don't find that it's flexible, like soft, like we've seen in other frames, and I don't find that it's rock stiff either. So it's somewhere in between. I did have some crashes, none of them terrible dramatic, but obviously it did survive through all my crashes. I wouldn't expect as we get into the colder months that if you do have a severe crash that this plastic is going to survive the same way it would survive if it were warmer out. Plastics have a tendency to get brittle on impact as they get colder and colder. I don't know what the breaking point in temperature is for plastics. I'm sure it varies from one plastic to the next. So the price point with the FrSky XM Plus, which mine comes in, is $140.99 off the Banggood website. You'll find a similar price direct from iFlight. I'll have links down below to both. And this is one that if someone is getting started or you have someone in your life coming out in the next few months for the Christmas holidays that might be interested or has maybe a whoop and they'd like to fly more aggressively outside, this is one I can get behind and I can recommend. It flies really nice and you've got the prop guards on there. You get good long flight time and you have all the feature set that you might ask for. They don't have to learn to tune. They don't have to really do anything other than bind it, set up your radio as you might for any quad, and maybe move the OSD elements around. Pretty simple and easy. You know, most people would be done, and I would say even the newest of person would be done with those things. If you've done a bind procedure and you have your radio set up, you'd be out and flying in battery charging time, say 30 minutes or so. So yeah, pretty good flight. I was pretty happy. If you can't tell, I enjoyed this. I really don't have too much to complain about when it comes to this little quad. It was a good time. I was pleased to be able to get to review it. Oh, one thing I did fail to mention, I did tie off my battery leads back here behind the post. You can see right there, I created a wrinkle in my wires. That way, if I had a battery ejection, if it tugs on these wires, it will pull up against that zip tie, and my little wrinkle or turn in the wires will remain so it won't pull on the battery pads. That's really the only thing I changed in order to make this kind of what I would fly every day if this were my only quad. I added a simple zip tie to the battery lead, and you might be asking why I didn't strap it down here to the bottom, and that was mainly because if I were to crash or come down on a cement surface, I thought that maybe the fat end of the zip tie might get on there. Plus, it allows it to sit nice and flat on any flat surface without having any obstructions down there. I'll put a CLI dump from this machine down in the description below, so if you flash a different version of Betaflight and find it doesn't fly as well, you can download that dump file and then use it at your leisure, or keep it on your own online storage, so that if you do flash a future version of Betaflight and it just doesn't work out for you, you can come back to that. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in that section down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.